Hey YouTube, it is Priest SLC, otherwise known as the Salt Lake Vapor, and I'm here doing a follow-up review of the SMOK TFV4 tank with RBA base. Now, when I last left you, I was doing a horizontal build on it. Since then, I've tried several different parallel builds and a few different things. The tank, I will say, at the least, has been probably about as problematic as most people have been reporting for me personally. Sometimes I get a setup that works really great and the thing wicks like no other. Other times I find that it leaks all over the place, it gets dry hits, and it doesn't feed properly. Now, I attribute that to the feed design here. Although the feeding channels here are very, very generous in size, very large, ample, I would say, sometimes you just don't get your cotton in the right place and it doesn't feed properly. So I started getting really upset over dry hits and it not feeding, and I would be taking it off, going back to my velocity. Velocity is one killer RDA. If you don't own one, I highly recommend it. Clone, original, whatever. It is worth whatever you're willing to pay for it because, in my opinion, the best RDA I've ever owned. But back to this guy, dry hits, problems like that. Now, I took a look at, what could I possibly be doing to cause these dry hits? And one thing occurred to me. I make my own juice, and typically I do between 80 to 85% VG concentrations. And it doesn't matter, you could have the best wicks in the world, and unless you're running something like a pure, a pure conditioned stainless steel mesh wick system, you're probably not going to feed high VG juices anywhere near quickly enough in order to get it to the coil to avoid any burning. So one thing that I would definitely recommend as an after impression is make sure you're running at least probably no more than about a 70% VG juice unless you're using the stock coil heads. There are people out there that are saying that the coil heads wick high VG juice really, really well, but I would probably stay at 70% and below. That's going to help keep your wick fed with fluid and, basically be able to get you better vapor. Now, the other thing, nickel 200 wire. For those of us out there that have temperature control mods, I have the SNOWolf 200, so I've got temperature control setting on it. This stuff will be a lifesaver, especially if you want to build RBA base. Reason being is because, well, this thing is very, very subject to giving dry hits because you don't have the perfect holy grail wick set up running in there, and nobody likes that. That's one reason I've got a couple of friends who bought these after I got mine, and they have since gone back to their RDAs or other tanks that they were using because they just basically said the thing was trash. They weren't too happy with it. So a couple of them gave it up completely. Another one has a temperature control system, and I said, hey, you know what? We should probably try doing a temperature control setup. See if we can get better results with a thinner VG juice as well as a temperature control wick, and lo and behold, those two items put together made it so that we were actually able to utilize these. Now, I usually do about an 8 or 9 wrap with 26 gauge nickel 200. Let's see, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We're going to go ahead and do a 9 wrap here just for giggles. And I'm actually setting this up. I figured, hey, while I'm setting this up with a new wick and the whole 9 yards, I might as well record a afterthoughts video and give people my impressions of it after using it for a while. The one thing I will say about this device is when you get it dialed in and it's working, it works great. It provides wonderful vapor. It's got plenty of airflow. Now, since I started using it, I've been closing off the mouthpiece and closing the chamber on the bottom to about 50% airflow on it. And I notice when I do have that higher amount of pressure on it, that the airflow is, if you've got a little bit more restrictive, then you're actually putting that vacuum on the fluid that you need to be able to pull it up into your wick, so you're saturating your wick and it stays wet and you don't get dry hits, which is one thing we don't like. Now with these nickel coils, I like to set them up on my wrapping jig, and then I just kind of pinch the inner two coils and kind of pull it out a little bit and then kind of push it in. Basically get it so it's still springy, still somewhat condensed, but you'll notice that I do have a good even coil across the entire length of the coil. And these are coils that are not really the best for doing, macro coils or anything like that. You want to have an actual coil built up and then feed your material in that way. And the combination of this with that cotton ball, Scottish log, I believe it was, seems to be working pretty good for me. The Scottish log has a good fat diameter, it feeds really, really well, and it wicks a ton of juice. So temperature control wick, a temperature on your RDA, which is temperature controlled, obviously, that is set for something like 420, 430 degrees, is going to be ample. And that's what I would recommend. Now, I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to do a horizontal coil just for this test. I'm going to be mixing up a new batch of lower percentage VG juice tonight, and I'm just basically setting that up. Actually, I might use some juice I already mixed up, which is at 70% PG, just to see how well it works. But once again, it's the same design. After you've built on this thing for a while, you're going to kind of get the gist of how to build these coils for this RDA, so they just kind of snap in. Leg of the lengths, probably what would I say? Probably about 4 millimeter long on the leg that's going to go down to the base, maybe 4.5. Then probably about a 2 millimeter, 2.5 millimeter long leg to go into the RBA base, and you'll be set up pretty good. It's just like anything else. When you've been working with a mod for a while, you kind of get a feel for how to set it up, and I've been working with this one. I haven't given up on it, although I have ordered a new tank. Let's see, I forget what the name of it is, but Rip did another review on another tank, and it has the company that he was sent the unit from for a review came with a Velocity style base for mounting the coils, and I was like, holy crap, the Velocity is my favorite RDA. I would probably absolutely love this thing. So hey, I've got to give it a try. So I've got one on order. I should be getting it within the next 2 or 3 days, I would imagine. If I don't get it by Saturday, I'll probably get it Monday or Tuesday, and you can definitely bet I'm going to be doing a review on that once I get it set up. I'm going to play around with it for a little bit, get a feel for it, see how it runs. And one thing about these coils, Nickel 200, is since you're setting them up for being a open coil instead of running them as a tight macro coil, you just basically want to make sure you're spacing them evenly. You want to make sure that you're up off your deck, and then you want to make sure when you feed the material, this stuff is it's not as rigid as working with Kanthal or with nichrome. So you're going to want to make sure that you take a little extra care to make sure that you don't bend this thing out of shape when you are wicking it, because with it being a softer metal than either Kanthal or nichrome, it's going to definitely have a tendency to disform and move out of shape. So that's one of the things when I do the log style wick. I mean, with these, they don't require a very big wick, especially when you're doing a horizontal coil build. When you do a vertical, you're going to want to completely blanket it and wrap it around, and that might be one thing that actually kind of helps serve it a little bit better than the horizontal coils. But yeah, just be very careful about the amount that you put in. I'm not going to say starve it for cotton, but definitely, you know, don't go too low on the cotton. The good thing about it is being a temperature controlled wick, you're not going to burn this stuff. You're not going to get those dry, nasty hits. If anything, you're going to get a bit of warm air coming up, and you'll know that you're not feeding quite as well. So, you know, my overall impression of this RDA, or this tank with the RBA section, it is a very good idea. I think there are definitely some things that could have been done better to enhance the performance. The stock coil heads, especially what they call a quad coil head, are absolutely amazing. I mean, they do a really good job. And I mean, I think they kind of are moving in the right direction. There's things I think that they could definitely improve on the feeding mechanism for e-juice into this coiled area. I mean, I think maybe, you know, with this one, I might have rather seen a couple of holes on the left and the right side, like the Kangertech tank, where I could have just fed a very lightly packed matted material through and have it feed directly into the coil from the sides versus this bottom. But, you know, they didn't. Who knows? Maybe we'll see them try something else like this again. And, you know, this is the feeding mechanism and style on this is very close to a lot of other of the previous tank systems that have been out there. So, I mean, some people swear by them, some people absolutely hate them and won't try them. One of my friends that bought one of these that abandoned it absolutely hated some of the older style of tanks, and once he got it, he was like, oh crap, it's the same style, but hey, at least the fluid channels are a little bit bigger than they were last time. Actually, I think I'm going to grab that new juice and we're going to try that on this guy because I am feeling daring. This is a juice I mixed with key lime as well as maraschino cherry and Bavarian cream. So kind of going for like a cherry Ricky style flavor. And one thing, I put 2% maraschino cherry, which is the Flavor Apprentice TFA. Anybody who's mixed with this stuff knows that this stuff is just absolutely potent. I mean, very potent. You add, typically I tell people if anybody's asking me, you know, hey, I'm going to mix with TFA maraschino cherry, what percentage should I go? I usually always say go 1, maybe 1.5. Well, I really wanted the cherry flavor to punch through, especially since the key lime flavor, which is absolutely delicious, is such a strong presence. I wanted the cherry to stand out from the key lime, which would normally overtone. And yeah, it's pretty strong. It's one of those flavorings that has kind of a very strong alcohol flavor until it kind of seats itself. So as you'll see, I haven't even burned this coil. I'm just going to get my wick saturated, get it tapped in to where I'm comfortable with where it's actually at, put the cap on, and start vaping this thing. So you guys are going to see if this works with this lower VG juice at the same time I am. So this is kind of my experiment. So once again, with this guy, the goal is to get this kind of pushed somewhat down into the area where the fluid channels are coming up from the bottom, get a little bit in there and have enough that it's got room to pull up into this chamber, some reserve to keep that wick fed, keep the coil fed so you don't get dry hits. So you're gonna have to play with this until you get it, you know, kind of on the same profile. It's kind of the same thing as when we were doing the vertical coil. You got to make sure everything is going to fit inside, but since we're doing a horizontal coil instead of a vertical coil, we're not too worried about this upper area right here because we're not even going to be putting any cotton there. We're just doing a wick that, as you can see, is somewhat dipping down into the juice well here, and I want to make sure that it's going down there, but there's still space, so the fluid has plenty of area to flow up into this area and saturate my cotton. And with this, using this Scottish log wick, it definitely wants to poof out and consume as much space as possible, especially after you've saturated it. So I think that looks good. We'll try slipping that over top, and I think it should just twist on. Yeah, did a good job there. Doesn't always go that smoothly. So now that we've got that on there, you can see that we've got our coil in there. We've got the material on the sides. It's a good looking coil, 8 wraps. And with 8 wraps, I think, probably get about a 1.9 ohm coil out of nickel 200 26 gauge, which is what I'm currently running. So we'll just take off the Velocity RDA. Put the base on here. Oh, actually, yeah. Put the base on here, and then we'll make sure we're in temperature control mode. I've already got it set for 430 degrees Fahrenheit. And I could set it a bit higher than that, but I just want to make sure that nothing is getting toasty in there. And what I'm going to do now that I've got this in here, saturate. Don't care if I get any down in the airways. And it looks like we're getting a good amount of vapor out of that coil. I could probably, yeah, and the temperature control is working beautifully with this. So now that we confirmed that that's working good, go ahead and put in the tank. And one thing I have noticed is the O-ring that they used on the bottom of this tank does seem to be deteriorating a little bit. That's one thing that Rip mentioned, is that they used a really crappy material at the bottom here instead of using like a silicone O-ring like they do on the RBA base seal or any of the other seals in here. This one is a special material, so when you put it in, just be very gentle to pull it out. Maybe give it a little bit of a clean twist before you pull it up and out to make sure that you're not just that any of the seal that has kind of clinged to the glass breaks free before you pull it out. That way, if it is something where it is breaking up a little bit, at least the material will stay down in that area. Then when you put the tank back down in, you will have the material that can be reintroduced into the seal. Crappy design, yes, I agree, but so far I haven't really seen a massive decline in material down there with mine. And if this new tank that I purchased, which should be here soon, is anything like Rip was just absolutely celebrating, I probably won't be using this much longer. I've got a couple of friends that could probably really use a tank or really want a tank and probably have an extra $30 in their pocket. And, you know, what can I say? You know, recouping on old equipment is really wonderful when you can do it. So let's go ahead and top this bad boy off. And with this fill system, how I showed that it just dribbles in there. After using it a little bit, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. After you fill it the first few times, it seems like sometimes this little white seal kind of comes out of sorts, and then you start dribbling up onto this area, and then you have potential for leaks coming down this side. But I just always kind of make sure I push it down before I start filling. And then sometimes I'll take something and kind of move it in this area to make sure there's no fluid that's blocking that area, or might just have stuck up there. So anyway, let's give this guy a try. And as you can see, pretty good dense vapor. cherry is definitely strong. It definitely needs a little bit more steep time for that to fall off, but overall I would say I'm very happy with it. Now, only time will tell if this is going to wick properly since I've saturated the crap out of the cotton inside of here, but so far it seems to be working just fine. I'm not noticing any visible leaks around the end with this setup, but then again, with doing a Scottish log style wick in there, you're packing that area fairly tight, so I doubt that it's going to allow much overflow to come up and into the coil. So give it another vape here, take a look at what kind of vapor we're actually getting out of this with the 70-30 mix, and then I will say goodbye, and we'll see you next time. Definitely good vapor production. So anyway, if you like this video, throw me a like. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and put them in the section down below. And as always, we'll see you next time. Keep vaping.